Welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tiger podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gorash. I am here with Free Press beat writer Evan Petzold. 1 week away from the All-Star break and maybe a few days off for Evan Petzold, which will be welcome. And the good news is, for the first time in a long time, the Detroit Tigers had a winning week, Evan Petzold. Let's talk about it.
We made it. It took us long enough, but we made it. 4-2 record this week. They went 1-2 against the Minnesota Twins at Target Field, and they went 3-0 against the Cincinnati Reds at Great American Ballpark. It was a sweep against the Reds, the first sweep for the Tigers since the season opening series against the Chicago White Sox at Guaranteed Rate Field. Look, the Tigers had a 2-5 record on the road trip heading into Cincinnati. It would have been easy to get sloppy and just to kind of get to the finish line of what was a really ugly road trip at that point. And hats tip to the Tigers for playing good baseball in Cincinnati. It felt like they were in control, even though they made you sweat in the final innings for all three of those games. Like, you didn't really ever feel like they were going to lose those games. It felt like they were in control. The offense did what it needed to do. The pitching was solid. Like, you couldn't have asked for anything more. So I think, like, hat tip to the Tigers for the way that they played in Cincinnati. They deserve a lot of credit for that because, again, 2-5 record on the road trip heading into Cincinnati. They were slipping. They've been slipping for a long time. It's been a rough go of things. Really, if you really think about it, like, it's been a really rough go of things since their 5-0 record to start the season, to begin the year. It's been downhill sledding from then on. And so they could have kind of mailed it in against Cincinnati, but they didn't. They played tough. So they finished the 10-game road trip with a 5-5 record. What did you think, Mark, about the way that they've been playing recently, really over this 10-game road trip, but especially what they showed in Cincinnati? It felt a little bit more like the way that they played in March and April.
Well, 2-5 going into Cincy. Cincy coming off a sweep of the Yankees, prime for a disastrous road trip outcome. Recall Parker Meadows from Toledo, and somehow, some way, they play like it's April. And let's be really blunt about it. Parker Meadows definitely had an impact on that, A. And B, when you have two starting pitchers the caliber of Reese Olson and Sandy Koufax lookalike Tarik Skubal, you got two really, really well-pitched games in those two games, and you got a sweep. It was a beautiful thing. It was fun to see him play some actual baseball, and it's been a long time. It just shows you what it could be if you had some better players and actually gave A.J. Hinch a chance to manage a baseball game, which he did have a chance to do in the Cincy series. So it was nice.
But Mark, that's the point though. That's the point. Is like you look at the standings, you look at where they're at, and you're right. Like they still have a long way to go. Like, as nice as it was to sweep a series, they're still 15 games back in the American League Central. They're still 7.5 games back for that final spot in the AL wild card. They still have 4 games coming up against the Cleveland Guardians, and then 3 games against the Los Angeles Dodgers. That's how the Tigers enter the All-Star break. So they're going to be tested. Like, the 3 games, it's a feel-good situation for a team that really needed like a feel-good series, if you will. But they're coming back to Comerica Park with their backs against the walls against the Guardians and then against the Dodgers. And that takes them into the All-Star break. And even coming out of the All-Star break, the schedule doesn't get any easier. The Tigers are still in 4th place in the AL Central. You got the Guardians at 56-32, the Minnesota Twins at 51-39, the Kansas City Royals at 49-43, the Tigers at 42-48 overall, and then the White Sox at 22-66. Again, it's 3 games, feels really good, but there's a lot of season left, and the Tigers are going to have to do a lot more if they even want to be back anywhere close to the conversation of the word postseason. They're not there yet for me. I don't think they should be there yet for fans.
Well, I have a pretty simple theory. When you're a massively borderline bad team or even a mediocre team, I never worry about who you're going to play. I always just worry how you play. So if the Tigers play well, they can beat anyone, anytime, day after day. It's just been so long since they've played well. I think we forget that part. So let's jump in to the big two. Question one of the big two, a fun part of the big two. Tarik Skubal and Riley Greene have made the All-Star game. Well deserved, boys. What does this mean for the Tigers? And what does it mean for Tarik and Riley Greene?
Mark, you already know Al Avila, Tigers' former general manager, somewhere down in Florida was pumping his fist, clapping his hands, cheering while watching the All-Star selection show. That's two homegrown players drafted and developed in this organization. Tarik Skubal, a 9th round pick in 2018, number 255 overall in that draft. And then Riley Greene, 1st round pick in 2019, number 5 overall pick in that draft. Both guys were voted in by their fellow players, not selected by the league. I think that is notable. It's the first time the Tigers had had a player voted into the All-Star game by fans or fellow players since Miguel Cabrera in 2016. Since then, all of them have been MLB, the league, making the selections for the Tigers. I think that means something. It's the first time the Tigers have had 2 All-Stars since 2017 when Justin Upton as an injury replacement and Michael Fulmer as an MLB selection represented the Tigers. Obviously, that doesn't include the 2022 All-Star game when Miguel Cabrera as a special selection from MLB joined Gregory Soto, who was an MLB selection in that game. That was when Commissioner sent Albert Pujols for the National League, Miguel Cabrera for the American League. So yeah, I mean, again, this is pretty awesome, right? Like getting back to Skubal and Greene, first time All-Stars, Skubal in his 5th season, Greene in his 3rd season. Both guys deserved it 100%. And I think it's a good thing for the Tigers in their future. And when you look at the core of the team, yes, they were drafted by Al Avila, but also, they were developed by, his player development too, both the Dave Littlefield era and then also in the Ryan Garco era. And I think when you look at it from a bigger picture, like these are 2 guys that the Tigers can build around if they so choose. Riley Greene definitely in that bucket. Tarik Skubal, we talked about it time and time again. We don't need to get into it again, but this guy has 2 more years of team control after this season. Are they going to sign him to a big contract? Are they going to let him walk? Are they going to hurry this thing up to try to win within these next 2 years? We don't know. But Riley Greene's going to be around for a really long time. And Riley Greene's a really good player, deserves to be there. I'm really happy he got the nod. We knew Tarik Skubal was going to get in. The question was, what about Riley Greene? And Riley Greene got in. I think that's a great thing for the Tigers. It's a great thing for Riley Greene. And also, it's a great thing for baseball.
Well, a couple things. First of all, you're never allowed to bring up the name Dave Littlefield on this podcast again. Okay? That's just as a personal favor to me. Let's talk about Riley Greene for a second. When I look at Tarik Skubal, I look at what I consider pretty damn close to a finished product. Okay? I mean, what we saw yesterday was maybe the best Tarik Skubal outing of his career, when you combine everything that goes into pitching a game. It was the perfect matchup. A lot of swing and miss on Cincinnati, but both the quality of the stuff and the precision of the location and the caliber of sequencing by Jakey Rogers, it was just a masterclass yesterday. Maybe the best game I've ever seen Tarik Skubal throw. The most dominant game, likely a shutout if the AAA shortstop would have fielded the easy ground ball in the 7th inning, but it was a masterclass. But my point about it is Tarik Skubal's pretty close to a finished product now. It's just how long can he maintain this level of consistency and greatness? On the other hand, Riley Greene still has room to grow on a consistency basis as a player. Just tapping into his power now, but still a lot of swing and miss, still, a lot of inconsistency in the quality of his swings day to day. And guess what? That is going to change. It could change in the second half of the year. It'll for sure change over the next year, but the growth from last year to this year is pretty substantial in the damage category of how he swings the bat. He's learned how to lift and separate, not so much of a ground ball profile, and he's doing damage. And when he gets other hitters around him, it'll really help make him better. Not that they won't still pitch around him. It'll just give him more guys on base. It'll be pitchers that are more tired and weary from facing other good hitters. And there's more upside to Riley Greene to come. Kind of looking at Tarik Skubal last year or 2 years ago and looking at Tarik Skubal now, I still think there's more to come from Riley Greene, and he's fourth in OPS for AL outfielders right now. So that's a pretty exciting idea. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, spot on, man. I couldn't have said it any better myself. Like, just to put these two guys in perspective, though, for what they've done, we need to talk about the numbers. We need to talk about where they rank. Like you mentioned, among AL outfielders, yeah, Riley Greene's one of the best. He deserves to be there. Let's start with Tarik Skubal. It's a 2.37 ERA, 20 walks, 132 strikeouts, 110 innings, 18 starts. Ranks second in FWAR at 3.4, behind only Garrett Crochet. He ranks fourth in ERA at 2.37. Behind only Reynaldo Lopez, Seth Lugo, and Corbin Burns. He ranks third in FIP, it's fielding independent pitching, at 2.54, behind only Chris Sale and Garrett Crochet. Now, FIP is similar to ERA, but it focuses solely on the events a pitcher has the most control over: strikeouts, walks, hit by pitches, and home runs. It entirely removes the results on balls hit into the field of play. Tarik Skubal also ranks fifth in strikeout to walk ratio at 6.60, behind only George Kirby, Zach Eflin, Joe Ryan, and Chris Sale. He ranks first in WHIP. That's walks and hits per innings pitched at 0.900. So yeah, nobody's getting on base, and he's dominating, like straight up dominating. He's been the best pitcher in baseball based on his 6.7 FWAR since July 4th, 2023, when he returned from flexor tendon surgery. That's over the course of 33 starts. So he's been doing this for a full season's worth of starts, and I think he's going to make it 1.5 full seasons worth of dominance with a Cy Young caliber finish in 2024. Now, I just mentioned Tarik Skubal's 6.7 FWAR since July 4th, 2023, making him the best pitcher in baseball since then. Do you know who's next on that list? Tyler Glasnow at 5.6 FWAR. It's not even close. Tarik Skubal is far and away the most dominant pitcher in baseball, and he has been for a season's worth of starts and then a couple more. And he's taken that into the second half of the season where he's looking to close out what's been an incredible Cy Young campaign so far. He's easily the front runner for me. There's no doubt about it. But that's where he ranks. I mean, he is a legit dude. He is a number one. He is a Cy Young candidate. Riley Greene, on the other hand, you're spot on, man. Like, this is a guy who's hitting 261 with 17 homers, 47 walks, and 100 strikeouts in 89 games. He has an 856 OPS, which ranks 18th among MLB players, 10th among AL players, and 5th among AL outfielders, 4th if we're not counting DH Yordan Alvarez. Look, the fan voting did him completely dirty. We need to talk about that too. Fan voting did him completely dirty. He didn't finish in the top 20 among AL outfielders in fan voting. Here's who got more votes than Riley Greene: Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Kyle Tucker, Stephen Kwan, Anthony Santander, Colton Cowser, Alex Verdugo, Cedric Mullins, Mike Trout, Adolis Garcia, Julio Rodriguez, Dalton Varsho, Tyler Freeman, Mauricio Dubon, George Springer, Will Brennan, Kevin Kiermaier, Evan Carter, Jarren Duran, and Leody Taveras. All of those players got more All-Star votes than Riley Greene. There's something broken with the fan voting system, and that's why I'm happy. That's why I think it's good for baseball that Riley Greene is getting to play on this stage, because he deserves to be in those, and he deserves to be in the top 20. I mean, come on. So I'm happy the players voted him in for that reason. I think fan voting did him so dirty. I don't like that at all, but it is what it is. But it's going to be Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Stephen Kwan starting the outfield. Other outfielders in the AL team: Jarren Duran, Riley Greene, and Kyle Tucker. Look, Riley Greene has been a development story for the Tigers, a big league development story. Some of the Tigers, AJ Hinch and the hitting staff included, can hang their hat on. I know Riley has his own guys. He has his trainer, Ben De La Cruz. We talked about him. He's got Jared Goodwin, who, we've talked about him before as his personal hitting coach. But Riley Greene needed just 87 games to hit 17 home runs this season, surpassing the 16 homers he hit across 192 games in his first 2 seasons combined. Since May 29th, he's hitting 303 with 8 of his 17 homers and a 990 OPS in 70 games. He's put the Tigers on his back while Kerry Carpenter has been on the injured list. Since May 29th, his 990 OPS ranks 7th in all of baseball, behind Aaron Judge, Yordan Alvarez, Gunnar Henderson, Jose Miranda, Rafael Devers, and Stephen Kwan. Also, immediately ahead of Bobby Witt Jr., Juan Soto, and Carlos Correa on that leaderboard. And by the way, he's worth +7 defensive runs saved in left field. So I think it's cool the players voted him in. It tells me that other players realize Riley Greene is becoming elite. He is becoming a superstar. If you're not paying attention, Tigers fans, get on the bandwagon now before it's too late, because this guy's only going to get better.
The interesting thing is, if you remember last year, Riley went on a heater for almost 2 months and hit 340 over a 2-month period. Hasn't really done that yet this year. So it's in there somewhere, and I'd be excited to see it in the rest of July and August. It would be a lot of fun. It'd become a hell of a year for Riley. All right, let's jump into question number 2 of the Big Two. Question number 2 of the Big Two today. Jack Flaherty needed a second injection in his lower back. Missed his second start in a span of 3 weeks. Is he healthy? What's his trade value?
I don't know, and not very high. That's where I'm at when it comes to answering those questions. I don't know if he's healthy, and I don't know if his trade value is very high anymore, because, look, this guy needed a second injection in a span of 3 weeks to relieve pain in his lower back. He had the first injection on June 10th, and then he had the second injection on July 2nd, forcing him to miss his July 3rd start against the Minnesota Twins. Both injections were administered by a doctor in Los Angeles. Now, he's scheduled to start on Thursday against the Cleveland Guardians, but in his words, he is taking his recovery from the back injury, quote, one day at a time, end quote. Now, the Tigers, according to manager AJ Hinch, never considered putting him on the 15-day injured list, but it's going to be 14 days between starts. I think that's pretty interesting. He made his most recent start June 27th against the Los Angeles Angels. It was 5 runs on 7 hits and 1 walk with 7 strikeouts in 5 2/3 innings. He said that his back didn't bounce back in the days following that start, which is a pretty fancy way of saying that his back just hurt really bad and wasn't getting any better. So yeah, like, what does this do to the value? It doesn't move it in the right direction. I mean, this is a guy who signed a 1-year, $14 million contract with the Tigers. He has a 3.24 ERA with 14 walks, 115 strikeouts across 89 innings and 15 starts. The Tigers plan to trade him because he is pitching on an expiring contract. On top of that, he has a ton of value because 95th percentile with a 33% strikeout rate, 95th percentile with a 4% walk rate, 90th percentile with a 2.88 expected ERA. That's why his value is high, but the value comes back down because he has a reoccurring back issue. The back injury is not good for his value, but I don't think the Tigers really have a choice. I think it puts President of Baseball Operations Scott Harris in a position where he has no leverage, because as much as you could say, okay, maybe the Tigers could throw him the qualifying offer if they decide to hold on to him and they don't get what they're looking for at the deadline, the qualifying offer probably isn't a good idea because Jack Flaherty has a reoccurring back issue. If you don't trade him, you're banking on him to be healthy for the rest of the season. If he gets hurt, well, then you kept him for nothing because he has absolutely no value. If he stays healthy, the qualifying offer is around $21 to $22 million. If the Tigers offer him the qualifying offer, and if Flaherty declines the qualifying offer, and if Flaherty signs with another team for $50 million or more, if all of those things happen, then the Tigers will get a draft pick in 2025 immediately after the first round. That's a lot of ifs for me. That's a lot of ifs. And this is super hypothetical, but what if Jack Flaherty knows that his back is hurt or there's the chance for long-term pain and the Tigers offer him the qualifying offer because they didn't trade him, and maybe Jack Flaherty just takes the qualifying offer because maybe he knows his back has an issue, and so why not just take the money, get paid? Well, then the Tigers are stuck paying an injured player more than $20 million, and you still get nothing in the long term. So how about the Tigers just trade Flaherty for whatever they can get and call it good? I think that's where they're at. Like the qualifying offer is a great idea on paper, but when you factor in the fact that this guy has had a reoccurring back injury, which he also dealt with last year, it's not great, Mark.
Well, Evan Petzold, I wrote a couple of sentences on our show sheet about this because I was pondering exactly what you've just discussed the other night. And here's what I wrote. Based on Scott Harris's entire roster building philosophy, which is using the premise of calculated risk. Remember that from 2 years ago? Remember those words, calculated risk, Evan Petzold?
Of course I do.
All right. So I just want to ask, somebody that's had an Ivy League education, an Ivy League business school graduate degree, did he miss the day they taught mantra number 1 in business school which is the lesson of don't be right and not get paid. When that happens, you assess the risk badly, like multiple years of a back injury. So guess what happened with Jack Flaherty? Scott Harris was stone cold right. The Tigers and Jack Flaherty together fixed what ailed his mechanics and turned him into one of the 5 most dominating pitchers in the American League in the months of May and part of June. And his trade value skyrocketed. And then what happened? A back injury, which he had last year and needed an injection for. And the rumor is had bothered him in previous years. All of it flared up. And now you have a pitcher that did everything right, everything you could have hoped for, everything you planned for. And his trade value is almost zero. So my question is, how is that a bright move? There were lots of other guys to sign, lots of other guys that had risk. Did they assess the risk here correctly? Got to say in hindsight, no.
So what do you do? Like, put that cap on. What do you do in this situation? You just got to move him for whatever you can move him for at this point, right? Because you mentioned the qualifying offer, like you're banking on him to be healthy in the second half of the season. And then you're also banking on him to decline the qualifying offer as well. And then you're also banking on him to sign for more than $50 million to be able to get, one of those top picks in the 2025 draft. That's a lot of ifs. If you're Scott Harris, what do you do at this point? Because it's one thing to look back, it's another thing to look forward. What's the move?
Well, my answer to this is I'm an adult. So without knowing the medicals, without having a doctor look at, the MRI and x-rays on what exactly is causing these back issues, as somebody that has had back issues and was rehabbed from them, the idea of throwing 97-mile-an-hour fastballs with my back, heck, I don't even like to go play golf anymore. I'd love to go in the cage and take swings, but I just don't think that's a great idea. So the idea of being a professional athlete and putting that level of stress for 100 pitches every 5 days, kind of frightening. So without knowing the medical circumstances and can they be repaired surgically, I don't have a good answer for you. I think it would be unfair to do that. All right, enough of that. Let's take a break. But when we come back, we're going to talk about the 2024 MLB Draft with Perfect Game expert Vinnie Cervino. We'll be back in a minute.
All right, I'd like to welcome Vinnie Cervino, national cross-checker at Perfect Game USA, to the Days of Roar podcast. For the first time to help us with our draft coverage, Vinnie came highly recommended from our friend Brian Sikowski, who worked for Perfect Game and joined the podcast last year, but he has since been hired at Duke University as the director of recruiting, analytics, and player development within the baseball program. Vinnie also knows Jared Goodwin, Riley Greene's personal hitting coach, who works as the VP of scouting operations for Perfect Game. Those are two good guys in Brian and Jared. But Vinnie, thanks for joining us, man. We're happy to have you.
Awesome. Very happy to be here.
All right. So look, the 2024 MLB Draft begins July 14th as part of the All-Star Game festivities. The Tigers have the number 11 overall pick. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us about the quality of players in this year's draft and how the group as a whole stacks up compared to past drafts?
So the 24 draft gets a little bit of a knock for not being as talented as some previous drafts, but I think the top end college talent, the high end impact talent there at the beginning of the draft is very significant. And I think there are a lot of really good players, and especially deep on the high school side of things when you're talking about potential overslot guys in the second, third rounds.
So what do you think the Cleveland Guardians are going to do with the number 1 overall pick? Obviously, 2 other AL Central teams picking inside the top 10 with the White Sox at number 5 and the Royals at number 6. Like, how do you see the top of the draft unfolding? Obviously, a lot of college bats. What do you think Cleveland does? And then who could be there for the taking for the White Sox and the Royals that we might see in the AL Central for years to come?
So I think Cleveland has a very interesting decision to make, because I think that when you're talking about the top of the drafts, you're probably talking about guys like Pizzana, Condon, even Chase Burns if you wanted to get into that SP1 territory. There's also been rumors of like a potential underslot deal with like a JJ Weatherholt, somebody who we thought was going to be a number 1 overall pick coming into the season but got hurt. They could really go any direction. I know Cleveland likes to be very finicky with their picks, and they could potentially cut a deal, maybe get some overslot deals going as we're talking 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th picks. Those are kind of the candidates right now. I've heard the White Sox and Royals linked to high school names. So you're talking about guys like Bryce Rayner out of California, Connor Griffin out of Mississippi. Those are kind of the 2 consensus number 1 high school guys right now. But also both could go with a college player because, like I said, the top tier college talent in this draft is very, very good.
So, Vin, Bryce Rayner, if he doesn't go to a team like KC or the White Sox, has been a guy that's also been linked maybe at around 11 to the Tigers. Let's talk a little bit about him and what kind of athletic profile he brings, because I hear big arm and a shortstop. A little worried about the hit tool. So go into that for us.
Yeah, so Bryce Rayner, obviously, the athletic, like you mentioned, is really, really good. He's like 6'4" and moves really, really well. Like projects out to play shortstop. Was the best hitter at the NHSI in April this year in Cary, North Carolina. Has taken a very big step forward this spring, I think, kind of in all facets. Over the summer, during the summer circuit, there was kind of a little, is he a pitcher? Is he a hitter? What are we going to do here? That seems to have definitely quieted. He seems to be kind of a slam dunk hitter now. And like I mentioned, the ability to play shortstop has kind of vaulted him into this top 10 discussion.
And, a pitcher that's been linked to the Tigers quite a bit, Ken Caminiti's, I think, nephew or cousin, yep. former major leaguer. Give us a rundown on that. It would be kind of upsetting to me if the Tigers went high school pitcher again with all these hitters in this draft. But, share with us what you know about Cam.
So Cam's an awesome player. If you're drafting Cam Eddy, you're kind of drafting the upside here. You're talking about a young left-hander who moves really well and is a good athlete, who's up to 98 right now. Doesn't quite have a plus secondary yet. He does have 4 pitches. He throws strikes. The fastball is very good. It's up to, like I said, 96, 97, 98. You're talking about a guy who will probably need a couple years of player development, a guy who I think player development teams would be very excited to kind of get to be able to work with. You're talking about a guy whose upside is probably that of an SP2 on a major league roster. Obviously, it might take a little bit of time to get there. There's probably a lot that would need to go into some pitch design and some pitch selection type stuff. But you're talking about in terms of foundational aspects here, it's a very, very good foundational pitcher.
Talking to Vinnie Cervino from Perfect Game, we talked about Cam Caminiti, the left-hander from Saguaro High School in Arizona. We've talked about shortstop Bryce Rayner from Harvard Westlake High School in California. How about shortstop, center fielder? Maybe he's a third baseman. I'm not really sure. Connor Griffin from Jackson Prep High School in Mississippi, somebody that, maybe could be a fit for the Tigers as well.
Yeah, there's even some teams that like Connor Griffin on the mound too, so he could even be a right-handed pitcher. He's a dynamic athlete. As far as tools go, he's a tool shed. You're talking about 70s in multiple areas there on the scouting card. I think he went 87 for 88 stolen bases in Mississippi this year, hit well over 500. It's a guy with all the tools galore. He's young for the grade now. He reclassed up along. Another guy who did that was Cam Caminiti. Both were originally 2026 graduates. Now we're 2025 graduates, or 25 to 24, excuse me. But Griffin's got a monster set of tools. He's a 70 runner with a 70 arm. You're talking about a pro body right now. The BP is electric. The ability to hit balls out of the park is special. He's a guy who will have to probably clean up some hit tool concerns. Unfortunately, Mississippi isn't the best state in terms of quality of competition, so there still are a little bit of those competition level concerns. But in terms of pure tools and even bat speed and offensive hitting tools, like nobody in this class has what he has.
Okay, so we need to talk about some college guys, but before we get there, these 3 high school guys that we've been touching on, I don't think they're all going to be there for the Tigers at number 11, but let's just say that they are. Let's say that all 3 of them were there at number 11 and the Tigers got to make their pick. I don't think that's going to happen, but hypothetically speaking, let's say that's the case. Left-hander, Cam Caminiti, shortstop, Bryce Rayner, and then obviously do-it-all speed guy, Connor Griffin, right, who can play the outfield, play shortstop, and like you mentioned, might be able to pitch as well. When you look at those 3 players, if they were all there at 11, who would you be taking and why?
If we're going those 3, I think I'm taking Connor Griffin. The upside there is just too significant for me to pass up. you're talking about a guy who, if everything clicks, you could be talking about an all-star center fielder type player, an all-star shortstop type player, the foundational prospect for a team for years to come. So I think I'll take Connor Griffin.
Hey, Vin, I know you always have some sleepers that you really like in the draft in round 2 and 3. And before we get to those guys, I want to ask you about a guy that I like in the draft. Really high ceiling, something the Tigers could use, probably a guy that's going to go in the teens, but may sign a little bit under slot at 11, would be Cam Smith from Florida State. Can you touch on him? Because he's a really interesting player.
Yeah, I love Cam Smith. Took a monster step forward last summer and this spring. Was unbelievable in the Cape Cod League as going into his sophomore season. Obviously very, very good for a Florida State team that made it to the Final Four of the College World Series there. A player whose athletic ability is very understated and is going to play a very good third base. He's got a cannon arm. Power is very good. There is some swing and miss, but that comes kind of in early counts, early advantage counts. When it comes to 2 strikes, he does a very good job at kind of limiting the whiff rate, so to speak. Obviously, there are a couple holes there, but his ability to use the opposite field for power is very rare, and it's something that really attracts me to him as a player. At his age, for his ability to use the opposite field, really allows me to think that his power is going to be significant in terms of the ability to use it in play.
You mentioned power, another guy that stands out. And I don't know if you've heard, but Spencer Torkelson is struggling in AAA Toledo. The Tigers kind of need a first baseman. Nick Kurtz from Wake Forest, like, what are your thoughts there? And I know he's been mocked, in like the 7 to 10 range, but I've also seen some mocks where maybe he's fallen, lower to like the 15 to 17 type range. Where do you think he goes, and what's there to know about him?
Yeah, so Kurtz is definitely a little bit of a wild card. I think coming into the season, he was definitely a candidate for the number 1 overall pick. I've still kind of heard him around kind of the back end of that top 5 range, but like you mentioned, anywhere from like kind of back of the top 10 onward is in play, certainly. He's a guy who's a monster from a physical perspective. Left-handed hitter with big juice. The field of hit's pretty good. There's a couple holes there. Plus defensive first baseman, like, checks really a lot of the boxes. The power is going to be something that I'll be interested to see how that plays, only because the exits are very, very good, and the raw power itself is very good. It's just that he's a guy that struggled with injury at times throughout his career. So it's something that I'm curious to see kind of what that pre-draft process looks like as we get closer to it.
Another idea that's a Days of Roar idea is to move Colt Keith to first base, which would then open up second base. And sure, there are some guys that are already in the organization that maybe could fill that. But second baseman Christian Moore from Tennessee, could he be a guy that sticks at second base long term? And what do you like about his game?
What I like most about Moore is the bat. It's really, really good. The mix of hit and the mix of hit and power. The ability to ambush baseballs and advantage counts is obviously pretty significant. He hit balls at 117, 118 miles an hour at the College World Series, so the impact of the stick is real. I don't know too much about Colt Keith's defensive ability, so I'll defer to you guys being the experts here. But I don't think Moore is going to be a plus defensive second baseman by any stretch. But the bat is very good. So if you want a very offensive infield, he would probably definitely fit the bill.
Hey, Vin, we always got to ask this, but any kids from Michigan? I know Bonemer is a pretty well thought of player locally, but besides him, talk about him a little bit and then give us a rundown on any kids that you're familiar with that are coming out of the state this year.
Yeah, Bonemer had a very, very good summer circuit. 2 home runs at the PG National, hit a couple more of the 17U WWBA last year. He's a really, really good player. I expect him to be gone, probably was in the top 50 picks. Another guy I really, really like is Dante Nori out of Northville, I believe. Quick twitch athlete, left-handed hitter. Really, really good bat to ball, underrated power, is like a 70 runner, 80 runner. He can play center field, all the tools you really, really like. And then I'll give you, how about one more pitcher? We'll go find his name here. Yeah, Nori's teammate at Northville, Joseph Broughton. Left-hander, has been up to 93, 94 at times, sitting throughout the low 90s. He's definitely a million-plus candidate in that second, third, fourth round range, potentially an overslot guy.
And as far as guys in round 2 or 3, for the Tigers, some guys down, in the 50 to 100 range in the draft. I'm sure that there are some Cervino gems that you have that you like. So share a few of those guys with us that maybe we can watch for.
Yeah, I'll go with a couple different players here. One of the ones that stands out to me is Braylon Payne, high school outfielder out of the Houston area in Texas. Another guy who's talking about a center fielder long-term, has made plus defensive plays before and will likely stick out there. 70 grade runner with bat to ball skills. Another guy like Nori, underrated power, does have the impact potential. His hit balls over 100. Will show the raw power during VP and stuff like that. And a guy who can definitely have feel to hit. Outside of the high school realm, I'll go with a college army here. One of the guys I like is Ryan Waldschmidt, who seems to be consistently ranked in the back end of the first now. So maybe that might be a little bit cheating there. A guy who was kind of off list because he was hurt to start the season. This came back and showed that he's definitely healthy. He has the athletic ability. He'll play the outfield long term. He can hit for average and power. And then one final guy I think who would make sense, at least in a previous iteration of a Tigers era, is a guy like PJ Morlando. Honestly, a guy who I thought was one of the best performers as a high school senior on the summer circuit, and a guy whose stock has seemed to take a little bit of a hit this spring. I think he's going to impress in workouts. I think he's going to really look the part in a big league stadium. And I think he's a guy that could potentially be a second or a team's second pick when you're talking about a high school guy with upside and power, and a guy who can walk and do things that major league quality hitters are doing.
Vinny, last thing I got for you is just, we talked about Cam Caminiti, Bryce Rayner, Connor Griffin. If we open that up a little bit more to some of the college guys that we discussed too, who do you like the Tigers taking at number 11 if they're there? Obviously, the board has to shake out the way that it has to shake out for these things to happen. But if there were a perfect scenario for the Tigers, what would that scenario be?
This is going to be a little bit of a cop-out, but I think the best scenario for the Tigers is having one of those tier 1 college guys drop and just absolutely grabbing the guy that falls. Whether it be a Weatherholt, a Nick Kurtz, a Braden Montgomery, if the injury pushes him down a little bit, which I don't think it will, by the way. There doesn't seem to be much structural damage outside of the broken. But any of those guys, even like a Hagen Smith, if there's something that comes back, I don't, whatever it might be. One of the two or three college guys or high school guys that we talked about there, your Griffin, Rayner, Caminiti. And I think that tier 1 in this draft is very, very good, like I had mentioned. And so I think if one of those guys falls to pick 11, I think you have to jump all over it.
Awesome. All right, Vinny, I think that's all we have for today, but we appreciate your time and your insight about the 2024 MLB Draft, which begins July 14th and ends July 16th. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for having me.
No doubt. Appreciate it. Everyone, that was Vinnie Cervino, national cross-checker at Perfect Game USA. There's more to discuss about the 2024 Tigers this week, but first, let's take a break.
Ev, we got about 5 minutes worth of good Parker Meadows this weekend, and it was actually pretty special. A lot of fun. Hit the ball especially hard. Homered Friday night to welcome himself back to the major leagues, and ended up trying to steal second base yesterday. And obviously, he has a pretty severe hamstring injury. Tell me what you know, and then let's talk a little bit about what he brought to the show.
Yeah, I tried to steal second base with 2 outs in the 8th inning of Sunday's game against the Reds. Ended up suffering a right hamstring injury. It's not good. Sounds like he's going to the injured list. We don't know the extent of the injury yet. Hoping to find out more on that soon. But yeah, it's not good. And it sounds like he's going to be landing on the injured list. And that's just no good. But man, like, hat tip to Parker Meadows from Days of Roar. I mean, there is nothing that we appreciate more as baseball people, right? As a guy who's struggling in the big leagues, goes down, makes a real adjustment, like a real adjustment, comes back, and then has immediate success. Like, that's so much fun. Like, I was so happy for Parker Meadows because you see these guys day in and day out. You see their grind. You see what they're going through. You see how much work they're putting in. And when things aren't going their way, and then they're able to go and they're able to make an adjustment, and it's a 2 months, and then they come back and they make an immediate impact. It just puts a smile on your face. It's like a humanity thing, right? Like that was good to see. That was really good to see. And I really appreciate the fact too that he was open with the adjustment that he did make. Like, he gave all of us insight into what the change was. So he made this little mechanical adjustment to his swing with a focus on his hands. His hands were dropping a little bit before he got sent down in early May. So his swing was uphill. So he worked on being more down and direct to the ball. Once he got that dialed in, then he focused on getting his swing on time for fastballs. Now with AAA Toledo, Parker Meadows hit .298 with 8 home runs, 28 walks and 42 strikeouts in 47 games, also stealing 19 bases in 24 attempts. He needed about 2 weeks in Toledo to make the swing adjustment, and then he spent the next 6 weeks earning his way back to the Tigers, staying on time for fastballs, so on and so forth. He was on time for fastballs again. The Tigers brought him back up for Friday's series opener against the Reds. And what's the first thing he did? He turned on an up and in fastball and crushed it. So good for Parker Meadows, first and foremost, for getting on time for fastballs. Good for him making a swing adjustment. And it wasn't just, one swing, has proven that. It's like, no, with the Tigers, before he got sent down, he was hitting .077 with a 465 OPS and a 28% swing and miss rate on fastballs. With the Mud Hens, he hit .404 with a 1.259 OPS and a 14% swing and miss rate on fastballs. So he was crushing fastballs in Toledo. He wasn't swinging and missing at them. Now, the one thing that, was a problem for him there was he really struggled with the swing and miss against breaking balls. He hit just 170 against those pitches. But when he went down to Toledo, he went to try to hit fastballs again. And what did he do? He didn't only hit fastballs. Well, he did. He hit fastballs and he demolished them for power. And he didn't swing and miss at him either. So a lot of really good things for Parker Meadows. I can't wait till he gets back because he makes this team different. It's a different feel watching him roam center field. It's a different vibe with him in the clubhouse. Like there's something about Parker Meadows. And maybe it's just because he's a good player and he's a good player who's going to find his way at the highest level, even if it takes him a little bit. But there's something about it that really stands out. It's a difference maker. We hope that he gets back as soon as possible.
Parker Meadows impacts games so many ways when he's even going moderately well. Let's include what he did this weekend, he just hit a rope shot off a left-hander, which is really, really good to see. And just in general, as you say, the vibe totally different around the Detroit Tigers when Parker Meadows is doing Parker Meadows things. Got to think he's out for 2 to 3 weeks on the short end, 4 to 6 on the long end. That's a tragedy because, the Tigers need all the good players they can get. They need anybody that can contribute to their offense. So hope that Parker can heal up quick, which leads us into some other injury news. Casey Mize suffered a left hamstring injury. Got replaced in the rotation by Kiter Montero. First, talk about what you're hearing about the health of Casey Mize when he might be back, and then let's jump into the Kiter Montero discussion.
Yeah, Casey Mize obviously going to be out until after the All-Star break with the left hamstring injury. That happened at the end of his start against the Los Angeles Angels there in Anaheim. Kiter Montero, he just needs polish. He allowed 2 runs on 6 hits and 1 walk with 4 strikeouts across 6 1/3 innings against the Minnesota Twins. It was his first time through in the rotation. Sounds like Casey Mize is probably going to miss 3 starts at a minimum. So Kiter Montero probably getting 2 more starts, maybe even a 3rd start to make it 4 total for him in the rotation as we stand right now. And that could very well take them, right up to the trade deadline. And if Jack Flaherty gets moved, maybe Kiter Montero sticks around. We'll see about all that kind of stuff. But Mark, you got a chance to watch Kiter Montero quite a bit, both in person at Comerica Park, and then obviously you were there, evaluating his last start. What do you think about what he brings? And I guess what's the upside that you see?
Well, look, he brings swing and miss. He brings a ton of inconsistency, but he brings a palette of a pitcher that not in stuff, but in deficiencies that reminds me a lot of when Reese Olson got promoted last May. And what it means to me is that Reese Olson's biggest problem was he couldn't locate his fastball. And when he made mistakes, they were in the heart of the plate, and he would throw 2, 3, 4 good innings, make a mistake in the middle of the plate. It would land in the stands, and it would, obviously hurt his ERA and hurt the game score quite a bit. And he had to learn how to make mistakes that didn't end up in the seats. Once he did that, starting in August, you have what is now one of the 30 best starting pitchers in the American League. So when I look at Kiter Montero, I see a guy that can make hitters swing and miss, has a plus slider, has a plus changeup, has massive inconsistency in his ability to command all 3 of his pitches, has a 96-mile-an-hour fastball. And what I see is the opportunity for Lund, Fetter, and Nieves to hopefully perform the same magic on the command level of Kiter Montero that they performed on Reese Olson. If they're able to come anywhere close to that, they have a bona fide quality starting pitcher that is going to make, hitters swing and miss. And those are ingredients to pitching success. The other thing, our friend Jerry McInerney is really good at dissecting different data points, and he's noticed already that Kiter Montero is sort of raised his arm angle a little bit. I'm curious if that'll improve the consistency, or what we like to call the IVB, the ride on his fastball. But I'm hopeful that just hopefully he can locate it with more consistency. Kiter Montero throws a lot of non-competitive pitches with all three of his pitches. And if he can stop wasting pitches that are not competitive and locate his stuff better, like any pitcher, he's going to be maybe pretty good. And I would expect he'll be in the rotation one way or another for the rest of the year, unless he doesn't do well. So notice also they did not bring up Matt Manning. You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, maybe Matt Manning's in the doghouse. I don't know. I mean, this is a guy who obviously the Tigers planned to have him as like their sixth starter whenever they needed a guy, and they used him early in the season. But since then, it hasn't been the same. Performance has been up and down in Toledo. And I don't know, apparently he's still getting his delivery in sync, whatever that is supposed to mean. Like he's still pitching. He's making starts in Toledo, but the Tigers just aren't going to him. So we'll see if he gets back up here. Right now, it seems like, that might not be the case. But we'll see what happens at the trade deadline. We'll see if other injuries pop up along the way. We'll see how long Casey Mize is actually out for. Maybe Matt Manning will get another look. But man, the fact they're not going to him, that doesn't tell me good things about him right now. That tells me that he's going through it, and he's got to find some things before the Tigers trust in him again.
Yeah, it seems like there's some problems in the relationship between Matt Manning and the Detroit Tigers. Not that I know that, but there was frustration when he was here, and hopefully they got time. Matt Manning's only 26 years old. He's still got a pretty great fastball, and hopefully things will work themselves out. All right. Big news. I got to think that when the lineup is posted for tonight, Monday night, Javier Baez is going to be in the batting order. So tell me what you know about that.
And Tigers fans everywhere cheer for the return of Javier Baez. I mean, man, it's been a rough go of things without him. I'll tell you that. So yeah, I mean, they've missed his presence. Look, man, I mean, on defense and honestly, like even on offense, when you look at the fact that what Ryan Kreidler and Zach McKinstry have done has been absolutely nothing on offense and on defense during Baez's month-long absence. Ryan Kreidler has been terrible at shortstop. Zach McKinstry has been terrible at shortstop, and neither of those guys are hitting. So if you're going to have a shortstop who's not hitting, well, why not just take the guy who's going to play better defense? That's Javi Baez. That's why Tigers fans should be excited that he's coming back. And you know what? Maybe he's found something. 4 games on rehab assignment in return from lumbar spine inflammation. Hasn't played for the Tigers since June 8th. The Mud Hens don't play on Sunday and Monday, which created this natural break in the schedule for the Tigers to make a decision about his status. Sounds like he will be back for Monday's series opener against the Cleveland Guardians. 4 rehab games, 4 hits and 12 at-bats with 1 home run, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts, hit a hanging curveball off Tristan McKenzie for a home run there with the Mud Hens. He played 3 or 4 games at shortstop. The Tigers had missed him in that defense. He's the captain of the defense. He knows what's going on at all times. And that's something that often gets overlooked with Baez, because a lot of people like to look at the swing and miss, and they like to look at the struggles on offense. But we can't forget about the fact that this guy is a plus defender with elite level instincts. He knows what's going on at all times. That does a lot for your infield defense, and they're going to be happy to have him back.
Look, when Javi Baez is not playing shortstop for the Detroit Tigers, by metric, the Detroit Tigers infield is a circus. And if you've been watching recently, they play like it's a circus. So I actually saw some frustration out of Tarik Skubal based on the infield defense yesterday. So it'll be nice to have a major league shortstop back at shortstop. I'll be excited to have that. As far as the hitting goes, who knows? Who knows if Javi Baez will ever hit in the major leagues again? But if he could hit an occasional home run and play solid defense, I think we'll take that and decide what to do with him at the end of the season. So, all right, let's talk about something that has been recently under the radar good, and that's Andrew Chafin. I think he's got 11 appearances in a row without being scored upon. Been missing some bats. But talk to me about Andrew Chafin, and should we be discussing him as closer? And that is a frightening discussion. So, all right, talk to me about it.
I don't think it's a frightening discussion at all. Look, we love our Jason Foley, but at the same time, should we consider Andrew Chafin as the closer for the foreseeable future? I think maybe. Again, who misses bats? Like Andrew Chafin misses bats. 28% strikeout rate ranks in the 86th percentile. 33% swing and miss rate ranks in the 92nd percentile. 35% chase rate ranks in the 95th percentile. His slider has a 52% swing and miss rate. The only problem is that Andrew Chafin has a 39% ground ball rate, whereas Jason Foley has a 51% ground ball rate. Chafin needs to get more balls on the ground. Like that is something that he needs because he's missing bats. He would just really needs to get more balls on the ground with his sinker. If he's able to do that, there's no question that he should be the closer. Like there is no question else to miss bats and get ground balls. Now, I understand he's not getting the ground balls that he needs to be getting right now, but the swing and miss stuff is so good. The strikeout stuff is there. He's got a 3.86 ERA over the entire season, but he also has a 2.81 FIP, fielding independent pitching. We've talked about that. I think it's a more accurate way to view his performance. Like he was really unlucky in late May and early June, but he's allowed 0 earned runs with 12 strikeouts in his last 8 innings, and he misses bats. The Tigers need a closer who can miss bats. You have to get swing and miss as a closer, as a late inning guy. Like you can't rely on ball and play all the time and expect to win close games. You need somebody who can miss bats and avoid ball and play. And Andrew Chafin has done a really good job of doing that, better than anybody else. Like that's why Alex Lang was the closer for as long as he was the closer, because he missed bats. And so I think if you're going with a guy who can miss bats, keep the ball from being in play, I'm taking that over a ball and play guy at this point, especially with the infield defense the Tigers have. You know, obviously Javier Baez, him coming back is a big upgrade, but that's your only real position of strength if Gio Urshela isn't at third base. Like if Matt Vierling's at third and Javi's at shortstop and Cole Keith is at second and like Mark Canha is at first base, you have a below average infield playing defense for a closer in Jason Foley who gets a lot of ground balls. Like I'm going to go with the guy who gets the swing and miss. That's why I think Andrew Chafin would be a great choice to take over as the closer. Also, Jason Foley's kind of been going through it. So I don't know. I think it makes sense, but we'll see what happens on the field.
I don't think Jason Foley's been healthy since the second week of April, if not back in spring training. Yeah, I mean, he can pitch, but I don't think you're seeing the real Jason Foley. He was throwing 100 coming out of the gate this year. We haven't seen 100 in 2 months, barely see 98. Command not great. Just doesn't seem real healthy. He's a lot better than this. He's been better than this for years, and just doesn't seem like the stuff is tight. Tiger bullpen ERA since the 1st of May, over 5. It's a dumpster fire. All right, let's talk on a couple other topics and then get the heck out of here. Matt Vierling set a career high in home runs, up to 11. It's about to play a new position, I hear. Talk to me about that. Let's tell me what you know about the offense and the defense.
Yeah, 11 home runs in his first 76 games this season, which is a career high for him first and foremost. But if you go back to last year, it took him 134 games. And in that stretch of games, he had 10 home runs. So you're looking at a guy who now has 11 home runs in 80 games last year, 10 home runs in 134 games. Matt Vierling has gotten to a new career high pretty quickly in home runs because he's done a good job of getting ready for, pitches that are inside, keeping his hands moving, doing the hand waggle, turn in, fire into the pull side. The problem is that pitchers are starting to notice that and they're starting to pitch away, which used to be Matt Vierling's bread and butter was pitches away, slapping it the other way for a single. And that's how he hit. Again, let's not forget this guy hit 261 last year. He's hitting 245 right now, but he hit 261 with limited power because he was able to take so many balls the other way. That's what makes him good. But as he's focused on turning on those pull side pitches, well, if he's not getting pitches on the inner half of the plate, that's not really designed for what his swing has been built to now that he's made some big swing changes. So It'll be interesting to see if he's able to make that adjustment back. I think is the next step in his development. As for the defense, yeah, he was supposed to play some first base. We'll see if that still holds up. While Parker Meadows is on the injured list, when Parker Meadows comes back, maybe that becomes, part of the game plan again, because Matt Vierling was getting the majority of the reps in center field. The Tigers wanted to keep his bat in the lineup. And let's just say Tarik Skubal's on the mound and you want Gio Urshela at third base because there's a bunch of right-handed hitters. Well, you still want Matt Vierling in the lineup and you're going to play Parker Meadows in center field. Well, if you've got Parker Meadows in center and Gio Urshela at third base, where's Matt Vierling going to go? He's going to go play some first base. He's done it before in his career. That's a plan the Tigers have for him. It also benefits them, when you look at post-trade deadline, because if Mark Canha is on the move and Gio Urshela is on the move, newsflash, the Tigers are going to need a first baseman. So might as well be worth, the while to get Matt Vierling some reps over there. So yeah, got to make some more adjustments offensively, but we'll see if he's able to do that in the second half of the season coming out of the All-Star break.
All right. My feelings about Matt Vierling are well known to anybody that listens to Days of Roar or follows me on Twitter. I'd like to remind everybody that after a sterling month of May for Matt Vierling, the best of his career, close to 900 OPS, he is now, since June 1st, slashing 187, 231, 341 for a 59 WRC plus. He has hit 4 home runs. He has knocked in 7 runs, which means in the last 130 plate appearances, besides himself, he has knocked in 3 other base runners. If you're going to play him at first base, please get me a blindfold and a cigarette. And, my tweet this week was Wenceel Perez is basically become everything that people like to discuss that Matt Vierling is. Wenceel Perez plays multiple outfield positions, steals bases, is fast, occasionally gets an important hit, is pesky, and is a good contributing to victory type of player, which is everything that Matt Vierling is not. Matt Vierling is a wonderful human being. He is not necessarily a baseball player that's going to help you win baseball games. And when he's only getting 250 to 300 at bats, and I've said this maybe 1,000 times, that'll be the time when he's probably a better contributor to what kind of team the Detroit Tigers are. All right, let's move on from that. I've had that discussion way too many times. I'm tired of having it. All right, let's touch on Mark Canha. Another great human being, another important part to helping develop Detroit Tiger baseball players, another person who is massively struggling at the plate. There may be a few reasons why. Why don't you elaborate on that? You spoke with Mark Canha about some of this.
Yeah, so first off, shout out Mark Canha for playing 1,000 games in his big league career. That's pretty awesome. He reached that mark on June 29th. But yeah, the Tigers traded for him and then picked up his $11.5 million club option. Since May 1st, he's hitting 198 with 1 home run, 19 walks, and 42 strikeouts in 52 games. Mark Canha, who Scott Harris called an on-base machine, he has a 285 on-base percentage since May 1st. He also has a 531 OPS in that stretch. It's a rhythm and a timing issue. Look, pitchers are better than ever before. He's 35. The Tigers have run him into the ground by making him the everyday first baseman since Spencer Torkelson got demoted to AAA Toledo. That's why they pumped the brakes a little bit on Mark Canha at first base in the Cincinnati series. They played him in the outfield, gave him a DH day, and then used him at first base in one of those games. They need to get him off his feet a little bit more. AJ Hinch is well aware of that. But yeah, it's rhythm and timing, and then the fact that pitchers are better than ever before. And when you don't have your timing, you're going to get sliced and diced. And that's what's happening to Mark Canha right now. Even a veteran player who has been around the league and has had to make adjustments before. Talking to him about it, he said, hey, he's going to keep working hard. He's going to keep grinding. He wants to show the young players that even when you go through struggles, like you got to keep working and you got to try to come to the ballpark trying to get a little bit better every single day. And that's what he's trying to do. Maybe one of these days it all clicks for him. But man, this has been a really long stretch of baseball that hasn't been good for Mark Canha. When you think about the fact that he's on an expiring contract, I mean, this is a guy that, yes, there's veteran leadership. And yes, like if he would have been able to have career average numbers, let's just say, he'd have some trade value at the deadline. Like he'd be getting moved if he had career average numbers. But what he's doing since May 1st, hitting 198, 285 OBP, 531 OPS, Like, who's trading for that guy who's probably a DH, can play a little first base for you, can play a little outfield, good presence in the clubhouse. Sure. Doesn't really say a whole lot. Not a big rah-rah guy, but somebody that, is willing to give advice when asked upon. I don't know, like, who's trading for Mark Canha? Like, who really wants Mark Canha if he's producing the way that he's producing? I'm not sure there's a whole lot of teams that are looking for this type of production in their lineup that are trying to go out and make the postseason. Now, maybe they can bank on Mark Canha turning into the old Mark Canha. But again, like, from a value standpoint, it's kind of down in the dumps right now. It's not great for Mark Canha, and also not great for the Tigers when you consider the fact that was a piece that maybe they could have moved at the deadline to get something back.
Well, so doesn't look real healthy, A. B, I do think some teams are more than happy to take Mark Canha. You're going to have to eat his money. You're not going to get anything back of value, but I think some teams may be willing to take him for a wild card low A reliever, which I don't necessarily think is a bad idea for the Detroit Tigers. He's been slugging .246 since May 1st. He has 1 home run in his last 214 plate appearances. He has knocked in 17 runs, which is nice. He has a 56 WRC plus, brings a lot to the locker room, but yeah. I'm curious, did you talk to him about his hip, how he's feeling, how he's, obviously playing over a hip injury? Did he give you any insight on that, or kind of just glossed over it?
Well, no, I mean, he had the hip injury and obviously has felt a lot better since then. But at the same time, like, he's not one to make excuses. So who knows what's really ailing Mark Canha? Like, again, this is a guy who's 35 years old. So, he's got aches and pains all over for sure, but he's not going to make excuses. Like, he expects himself to go out there and produce. And look, this is a guy that, like, if he was injured and if he was really dealing with something big picture, I think he would say that, like, first and foremost. But secondly, on top of that, like, watching him come back to the clubhouse after being in the batting cages, just dripping in sweat because of how many swings he was taking to try to get things locked in. Like, a guy who's injured doesn't put that kind of effort into fixing his swing. Like, they're going to put more effort into rehabbing and trying to make their body feel better. And then after that, he went out and hit on the field and he wasn't even playing that day. So, like, this is a guy who is locked in, trying to find answers, trying to find solutions. Again, does he have, some bumps and bruises and some ailments along the way? Yeah, every guy does at this point, right? Like, you leave spring training, or you show up to spring training as healthy as you're going to be all season, and it only gets worse from there. On top of that, Mark Canha's 35, but he ain't making excuses. That's all I'm going to say.
All right. Sounds like a disaster of a trade deadline for a team that's, in need of some infusion of talent, which I don't really want to have a debate about now. We got plenty of time to talk about the trade deadline. All right, time to get out of here. Got 2 interesting teams coming to Comerica this week. Got the draft next Sunday. I'd like to remind everybody to please rate, share, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And we do love how much love we've been getting out in the podcast sphere. Everybody that listens to Days of Roar. You can find us at Apple, Spotify, and of course at thefreep.com, embedded in any Evan Petzold article. I'd like to thank our producer, Robin Chan, Free Press editor, Nicole Avery Nichols. Robin, thanks for saving us every week. Happy birthday to Braden Michael Gorash and to the spectacular Savannah Petzold. Evan Petzold will be home this week. I'd like to remind everybody, hope you had a good 4th of July, and peace.